At exactly 6:42 a.m., a motorcycle engine roared through the quiet dawn air in the heart of downtown Chicago. As the sun rose between towering skyscrapers, casting golden slivers of light across the steel and glass giants of the Loop, a solitary figure pulled up in front of a building that dominated the skyline: Sterling and Price Holdings, a billion-dollar real estate empire, a symbol of corporate excellence. And behind its glass doors, a culture so polished, so proud, so carefully curated, it would soon be exposed for what it truly was. The man who stepped off the bike didn't belong there. At least, that's what everyone inside would think. He wore a faded hoodie pulled over his head, dark jeans scuffed at the knees, and a worn-out backpack slung over one shoulder. To the passers-by, sipping lattes and rushing to catch morning meetings, he looked like a delivery guy at best, a loiterer at worst. His shoes were dusty, his gait calm, his posture confident, but not loud. He didn't carry the arrogance of someone trying to make a statement. He didn't need to, because what no one knew, what not a single soul inside Sterling and Price suspected, was that the man in the hoodie was the son of its founder, the late Howard Sterling, and not just a son, the only heir, the rightful CEO, the man who now owned everything behind those marble columns, every suite, every penthouse, every executive desk, and every lie told within those walls. His name was Elias Sterling, and he was about to turn this company upside down. For the last 6 years, Elias had vanished from the corporate world. After his mother, an African-American civil rights lawyer, died unexpectedly, he left Chicago, leaving behind a world he no longer recognized. He traveled across the globe, working with urban communities in Cape Town, studying inclusive leadership in Amsterdam, cleaning his own boots in the back alleys of Istanbul. He did it all anonymously, intentionally avoiding the spotlight that his last name could so easily buy. But recently, whispers had found their way to him, ugly ones. Whispers that Sterling and Price, the company built with the dream of equity and expansion, had become a breeding ground for silent racism and systemic exclusion. That the people who ran it now, his father's former protégés, had twisted the firm's culture into one of elitism, where promotions were handed out at country clubs and resumes with ethnic-sounding names mysteriously never made it past HR. There were even rumors of public humiliation, of cleaning staff being berated, of black and brown employees being pushed to corners, invisible. Elias didn't want to believe it, but he knew better. Power has a way of revealing people, not corrupting them. And so, he came back, not as the man everyone expected, but as the man no one saw coming. He didn't walk through the revolving doors like an executive. He entered from the side, through the service elevator. No name badge, no assistant, just him and a mission. Today, Elias Sterling was applying for a janitorial position. And what happened next? It was worse than he imagined. It started the moment he reached the front desk. 2 receptionists, blonde, polished, corporate to the bone, barely looked up when he approached. One gave him a half smile. The other didn't even acknowledge him. "I'm here about the job opening," he said quietly. Their silence was cold. Then came the voice, sharp, commanding, condescending. "You lost, bro. Deliveries go to the back." Elias turned. A man in his late 40s, tan suit, slick hair, and a voice dipped in superiority stood behind him. Jacob Callahan, Director of Operations. Elias recognized him from old board meetings, back when he was a teenager peeking into conference rooms his father never let him enter. "I'm not delivering anything," Elias replied calmly, I'm here for a job. Any open position? Jacob laughed. You want to work here? He asked, eyes scanning Elias from head to toe. In that? Elias simply nodded. The receptionist finally typed into her computer and smirked. Only thing open is janitorial. Jacob's grin widened. Perfect. Let's see how long you last. And just like that, the heir to $1 billion company became the new janitor. That morning, as he changed into the uniform in the locker room, gray shirt, navy slacks, badge labeled E. Sterling, he caught his own reflection in the mirror. He saw not just the CEO in waiting, but the son of a woman who had scrubbed court floors with her own hands when no one would hire her as a lawyer because of her race. He saw history in his veins, dignity in his silence, and fire in his purpose. But what he didn't know yet, what would be revealed in the cruel hours to follow, was how deeply the rot ran. Amanda Keller, the janitorial supervisor, didn't waste time. Within 10 minutes of meeting Elias, she yelled at him for looking lazy while polishing the same glass wall twice. She questioned whether he spoke English, despite his flawless grammar. And when he wiped a perfectly clean table in the executive lounge, she stared at him with such unfiltered disgust that even the other janitors looked away. This is filthy. Are you blind? Then, with a theatrical flourish, she hurled an entire cup of black coffee across the table. It splattered across the pristine glass, dripping like spilled ink on truth. Clean it again. And Elias did, not because he had to, but because he was watching, listening, taking notes. By noon, he had been humiliated, ignored, mocked, and belittled, all by people who believed he had no value, no voice, no power. And that's what made it so perfect. Because the people laughing at him, they were about to beg him for forgiveness. And when the real Elias Sterling stood up, not as a janitor, but as their new CEO, he would remember every name, every word, and every moment of disrespect. This wasn't just about exposing injustice. It was about reclaiming legacy. By mid-morning, the fluorescent lights above the employee lounge flickered against a pristine white ceiling, casting long shadows on the floor that Elias Sterling had already mopped twice. His shoulders ached, not from the labor, but from the weight of silence. The kind of silence that came from holding back, biting his tongue while watching injustice unfold, one microaggression at a time. Elias didn't flinch when Amanda Keller passed by again, her heels clicking like gunshots across the tiles. She barely acknowledged his presence, but he noticed how she smiled, so effortlessly, when she greeted Brad, the white security consultant in his tailored suit. "Morning, Mr. Reynolds," Amanda chirped. "Hope your weekend was fabulous." But with Elias, there were no pleasantries, only orders. "You're still not done with the West Corridor?" she barked. "I finished it 20 minutes ago," Elias replied evenly. "Well, do it again. Your version of clean isn't cutting it," she snapped, tossing a pair of gloves onto the cart without even looking him in the eye. Elias bent over and picked them up. Her disdain wasn't hidden, it wasn't subtle, and it wasn't unique. Everywhere he moved, Elias felt it. The second glances, the calculated avoidance, the suppressed laughter. In the break room, no one offered him a seat. In the elevator, conversations died when he stepped in. Even when he held the door for a group of interns, they barely muttered, "Thanks," too busy scanning their phones to notice the man who'd one day sign their paychecks. Yet through it all, Elias remained poised, silently watching as the culture of Sterling and Price revealed itself in real time. This was no longer just about a few rude comments or a bad manager. This was a rot woven into the walls, polished over with plaques and marble. The company had become a stage where respect was reserved only for those who looked the part, and dignity was handed out like a commodity based on skin tone, title, or designer shoes. It wasn't long before Jacob Callahan re-entered the picture. The man strutted through the hall like he owned it, his laugh loud, his sarcasm louder. Today, he carried a cup of espresso from the cafe downstairs, which he sipped between casually tossing trash onto the freshly mopped floor. Elias said nothing. Jacob watched him bend over silently to clean it. "You missed a spot," he said with a smirk, deliberately crumpling a paper napkin and tossing it at Elias's feet. "I guess even low expectations are too high for some people." Across the hallway, a group of junior associates chuckled, not realizing or caring that their amusement was being silently recorded in Elias's memory. Not just what they did, but who stayed silent, who looked away. And then came the moment that shattered the illusion that these were just isolated incidents. Elias had been reassigned to the executive lounge, where a mid-morning meeting had just wrapped up. The scent of cologne, catered pastries, and entitlement still lingered in the air. He began cleaning quietly, methodically. As he wiped the sleek glass table, Amanda stormed in, flanked by a few other staff members. "Unbelievable," she said, pointing at a faint fingerprint smudge barely visible under the light. "This is filthy. Are you blind?" Before Elias could respond, she reached for a full cup of coffee sitting on the sideboard and, without hesitation, hurled it across the glass surface. Dark liquid splashed across the table, splattering onto the floor, seeping into the rug. Gasps escaped from those standing nearby. And then came the silence. That awful, sharp silence. Amanda stood with her arms crossed, glaring. "Now clean it again," she said, her voice as cold as the tile beneath Elias's feet. He didn't move at first. He let the silence settle, let it make them squirm. Then slowly, he picked up the rag. But it wasn't obedience. It was observation. He was recording everything, not with a camera, but with clarity. He saw the faces of those who smirked, those who whispered, and those who, despite witnessing the degradation, said nothing at all. It wasn't just Amanda or Jacob. It was the entire system. A company that allowed disrespect to parade as discipline. A culture where arrogance was applauded and integrity was optional. In that moment, Elias realized the truth. The company his father built, the one he had dreamed of inheriting as a beacon of empowerment and inclusion, had failed him long before he walked through those doors in a janitor's uniform. But he wasn't angry. Not yet. Because Elias understood something that no one else in that room did. He held the ultimate power, not just to fire, not just to discipline, but to transform, to tear it down and build it again. This wasn't going to be a story of revenge. It would be something much more radical. A story of reckoning. As he finished wiping up the spilled coffee, Amanda clucked her tongue. "Hurry up. We've got a board lunch in here later, and I don't want it looking like a bus stop." Elias stood, looked her directly in the eyes. "Yes, ma'am," he said, and then he turned. As he walked away, pushing the cleaning cart down the hallway, past employees who still didn't know who he was or what was coming, Elias Sterling felt it, the storm gathering inside him. Because every insult, every slight, every passive-aggressive comment, they were fuel. And tomorrow, that fuel would burn through the lies they'd built their careers on. They had no idea the man they dismissed today would be the one dismantling their legacy tomorrow. But they would, very soon, and they'd remember it forever. Elias had grown used to the subtle humiliations, the forced smiles, the phony concern, the performative professionalism that evaporated the moment he turned his back. But this morning, everything changed. Today, they didn't just underestimate him. They crossed a line that couldn't be undone. The day started like the others. Elias arrived early, as always, blending into the quiet hum of pre-office hours. The corridors were still, the windows spilling early light over sleek, spotless surfaces. Most employees hadn't yet clocked in, but Amanda was already barking orders at the cleaning staff, one hand wrapped tightly around her energy drink, the other holding a clipboard like it was a badge of power. Elias was in the middle of disinfecting the main entrance floor when he heard the sharp clatter of heels. Amanda again. She stopped abruptly, watching him mop. "You're still on this section?" She scoffed. "You move slower than my grandmother." He didn't respond. He simply nodded and returned to his work. Amanda leaned in, close enough for her voice to turn venomous. "You're lucky to even be here," she hissed. "You people don't usually last a week in this building." She walked off before Elias could reply. Not that he would have. He was no longer surprised by the thinly veiled hostility that had become her signature. What stunned him now was how much of it the company allowed. No one batted an eye. No one ever did. Hours later, the tension in the air was heavier than usual. Word had spread. A surprise executive visit was happening that afternoon. Elias knew what that meant. His father, Robert Sterling, was on his way. Elias had texted his father that morning. "Make sure you're on time today. There's something I want you to see." Robert never responded. In the boardroom, preparations were already underway for a high-level meeting with department heads and division managers. Amanda was frantic, commanding the janitorial team with a bark that echoed through the halls. She shouted over minor smudges, micromanaged furniture placement, and demanded perfection from people she refused to even learn the names of. Elias was refilling a soap dispenser in the executive washroom when Jacob Callahan strolled in, whistling to himself. He washed his hands, looked in the mirror, and caught Elias's reflection. "Well, well," Jacob grinned. "Didn't expect to see you still here. Thought Amanda would have scared you off by now." Elias offered no reaction. Jacob reached for the paper towels, then turned suddenly. "You know," he said, voice dripping with sarcasm, "you could probably make a decent career out of this. Cleaning toilets, picking up trash. It suits you. Not everyone's meant to wear a suit." He paused for effect. "Besides, the real players upstairs don't look like you. You know what I mean?" Elias straightened. "Do you?" Jacob smirked and threw the crumpled paper towel at his chest. "I was just being honest." As he walked away, the words hung in the air like fog, dense, suffocating, and impossible to ignore. Later that day, Elias stood alone in the elevator, heading to the top floor for his final assignment before the meeting. As the doors slid open, he was met by Amanda again. This time, more agitated than usual. "Where have you been?" she snapped. "The conference room is a mess. I told you twice to take care of it." "I'm heading there now," Elias replied, calm and measured. "You're heading there now?" she mimicked, rolling her eyes. "Move. Faster." He walked past her, pushing his cart into the boardroom. The space was immaculate, but that wouldn't matter. Amanda was looking for a reason to belittle someone, and Elias was her favorite target. Minutes later, Amanda stormed in behind him with two other employees. She gestured wildly toward the freshly cleaned glass table. This, she said loudly, this is what you call clean? Elias didn't flinch. It was sanitized just a moment ago. Amanda's face twisted. Let me show you what real cleaning looks like. She grabbed the untouched latte sitting on the side buffet, walked over to the center of the table, and without warning, hurled it. The cup hit the glass with a loud thwop, coffee exploding across the surface, dripping down onto the carpet. Gasp. One of the assistants behind her stifled a noise. The other looked away, uncomfortable. Elias didn't move. He just looked at her. The silence stretched. Amanda crossed her arms and sneered. Now do it again. And maybe this time, do it right. Something inside him settled. Not boiled over. Settled. Cold. Final. This wasn't humiliation. This was abuse. Targeted, repeated, institutional abuse. She wasn't just trying to shame him. She was testing how far she could go before someone stopped her. No one would. Not yet. Elias bent over and began cleaning up the mess, but his hands were steady. His eyes focused. He knew now that Amanda had given him exactly what he needed. Not just evidence of a toxic work culture, but a personal demonstration of how little his father's company valued basic human decency. The room was quiet as Amanda left, satisfied with her performance. But just as she exited, the receptionist down the hall gasped. Her phone, still pressed to her ear, fell into the crook of her neck. Yes, Mr. Sterling. Right away, sir. Amanda froze. The name hit her like a thunderclap. Sterling? Across the office, whispers ignited. Executives scrambled. Ties were straightened. Makeup reapplied. Voices lowered to cautious tones. Robert Sterling had arrived. Amanda smirked, brushing invisible lint from her blazer. The real boss was here. This was her moment. Her chance to stand out. But what she didn't know, what no one knew, was that Robert wasn't the one they needed to impress anymore. Elias stood alone in the conference room, watching the sunlight stretch across the floor, warming the very place Amanda had tried to humiliate him. His uniform still clung to him, soaked in coffee, but he didn't care. The coffee would dry. The truth wouldn't. Today, they had crossed the line. Tomorrow, he would draw a new one, and it would change everything. The sound of polished leather shoes against tile echoed down the corridor as Robert Sterling made his entrance. The boardroom, once buzzing with tension, now fell into a heavy hush. Executives, who had once lounged casually at the polished table, straightened their backs with mechanical precision. Assistants clutched clipboards like lifelines. Amanda adjusted her blazer and stood tall, a smug grin flirting at the corners of her mouth. This was it, the moment she'd been preparing for her entire career. To her, Robert Sterling represented power, legacy. A man who could open doors with a word and close careers with a glance. She imagined the handshake, the eye contact, the praise for her firm but effective management. She had no idea that the very person she'd been humiliating all week had a more direct line to Robert than she ever would. The billionaire CEO entered with a commanding air. Behind him walked two silent assistants, a security detail, and the head of legal counsel. The team fanned out, not with panic, but with purpose. Robert scanned the room, his eyes passing over the people he had employed, trusted, empowered, many of whom now shifted nervously in their seats, unsure of what this surprise visit signaled. Good afternoon, Robert said, his voice steady but firm. I won't take up much of your time. I'm here for one reason, and one person. The room tensed. Amanda smoothed her skirt and prepared herself, certain he meant her. Jacob, 2 rows behind her, sat stiffly, his smile uneasy. I've spent decades building Sterling and Company, Robert continued. But no matter how many towers we raise or contracts we sign, nothing matters more than the culture we create inside these walls. Several heads nodded reflexively, though no one truly understood where this was heading. Robert stepped closer to the front of the room, his gaze narrowing slightly. It's easy to think success is measured by numbers, revenue, market share, growth. But the truth is, if we don't know how to treat people, our people, with dignity and respect, then we are nothing but an empire of glass waiting to shatter. Murmurs stirred around the room. Amanda tilted her head, confused. Jacob shifted in his seat. A few eyes darted toward the janitor still standing at the edge of the room. Elias, quiet, steady, unbothered. Today, Robert said, pausing with purpose, I want to introduce someone you've all seen, but none of you have truly recognized. He turned, slowly extending his hand toward Elias. My son, Elias Sterling. The silence that followed was cataclysmic. Mouths dropped. Papers slipped from hands. Amanda's blood turned cold. Jacob's face lost its color. Elias stepped forward, still in his navy blue janitor's uniform, still carrying the scent of cleaning solution and quiet endurance. But now, every step he took shook the very foundation of the room's assumed order. No one spoke. They didn't need to. The collective horror painted across every face said enough. Elias stopped beside his father, lifting his chin slightly as his gaze swept across the stunned crowd. You all have had the opportunity to work with me this past week, Elias said, his voice calm but cutting. Some of you mocked me. Some ignored me. A few showed small, fleeting kindness. Most treated me as if I didn't belong. He turned his eyes directly to Amanda. I was told to move faster, to clean better. I was called boy. I had coffee thrown across a table and was told to clean it again. Amanda's lips trembled. She tried to interject, but the weight of the truth, witnessed by dozens, rendered her voiceless. I came here not to spy, Elias continued, his voice deepening with emotion, but to understand. To see if this company, my inheritance, was worth carrying forward. A few employees dropped their gazes. Others looked at Elias with a new reverence, as if seeing him clearly for the first time. Jacob stood up, flustered. Mr. Sterling? Elias, I didn't know. If I had known. Elias cut him off with a look that said more than words ever could. That's the problem, Jacob. You treated me poorly, not because you thought I had power, but because you thought I had none. Robert stepped in now, his expression unreadable. What my son witnessed these past days is unacceptable, unethical, and unworthy of the company that bears our family name. He turned toward Elias. The floor is yours, son. Elias took a slow breath. Effective immediately, he said. Jacob Callahan, your employment is terminated. Jacob froze, then stammered, Please, I didn't mean. You meant everything, Elias said. Every laugh, every insult, every time you stepped over me to feel taller. 2 security officers approached from the door. Jacob backed away slowly, disbelief in his eyes, but no one stopped them as they let him out. Amanda stood, panic flashing in her eyes. Elias, Mr. Sterling. I didn't know. I didn't mean to. Elias turned to her, You abused your power. You demeaned your team. You created a culture of fear and hostility. You don't deserve to lead anyone. Amanda swallowed hard. But you're dismissed. The words were final. She stood frozen for a moment before breaking down, her image of control and superiority unraveling in front of the entire room. She tried to speak, to defend herself, but it was too late. The damage had been done. She walked out slowly, her head bowed, her legacy erased in an instant. The room remained still. Then Elias turned to the remaining staff. His eyes scanned each face, not with resentment, but with resolve. I saw everything this week, and I will not forget it, he said. But I'm not here to punish everyone. I'm here to build something better. He pointed toward a young woman near the back. Her name was Maya, a member of the junior operations team. She was one of the few who had smiled at him, greeted him, thanked him for his work. Maya, Elias said, I remember your kindness. You treated me with dignity when you had nothing to gain. Effective today, you're promoted to team lead. We need more leaders like you. The room erupted in quiet applause, gentle, hesitant, then growing louder, more genuine. For the first time all week, hope walked into that room. Real change had a face, and it looked like Elias Sterling. His eyes returned to the group. This is your chance, he said, to decide who you really are. Because the era of entitlement is over. From now on, we lead with integrity, or not at all. And just like that, the hierarchy shattered. The room didn't just see a janitor or a boss anymore. They saw a man who'd lived the mission, not just written it. A man who had tasted injustice and refused to let it shape him into someone bitter. Elias Sterling had taken back the company, not with revenge, but with vision. And tomorrow, it would no longer be the same company. It would be better. In the days that followed the reveal, Sterling and Company began to feel like a different place. The air that had once felt heavy with silent judgment and whispered arrogance now held something new. Possibility. Gone were the oppressive glances and hushed chuckles in the hallways. In their place came something the company hadn't known it was missing: accountability, humility, and a collective exhale of long-restrained truth. Elias Sterling, no longer hiding in plain sight, assumed the mantle of CEO, not with spectacle, but with quiet, commanding resolve. He didn't make sweeping speeches to remind people of his power. He didn't need to. The employees had already seen what leadership looked like: when it picked up a mop, when it withstood humiliation, and when it refused to retaliate with cruelty. Now, it was time to lay a new foundation, one built not on image, but on integrity. His first act as CEO wasn't a press release or a board restructuring. It was a company-wide meeting, not mandatory, not formal, but an open-floor gathering in the atrium where employees from every department stood side by side. Elias didn't speak from a stage. He stood among them, equal in height, if not yet in the gravity of presence. And that was the point. I didn't come here to punish, Elias began. I came to understand. And what I saw wasn't just a few bad apples. It was a culture that quietly allowed people to be dismissed, belittled, erased, simply because they didn't fit a mold. There was silence, but it wasn't fearful. It was reflective. A few employees nodded. A few others looked away, guilt lining their expressions. I'm not asking for perfection, he continued. I'm asking for presence, for courage, for people who are willing to see each other fully and treat every single person who walks through those doors with respect, not because they might be someone important, but because they already are. It wasn't a performance. There were no applause signs or rehearsed speeches. It was real, and that made all the difference. Elias then introduced a new initiative, the Sterling Integrity Program. It wasn't just diversity training, though that was part of it. It was a series of structural changes to hiring, mentoring, leadership development, and conflict resolution. But most powerfully, it came with a platform for employees to speak anonymously and honestly about the culture, the inequities, the gaps in empathy. He didn't stop there. The janitorial and operations teams, once invisible, now had a representative on the executive feedback board. Wages were reevaluated. Advancement paths were built for roles previously considered stagnant. Those who had spoken up, like Maya, were empowered to lead change from within. Robert Sterling remained involved, but deliberately took a step back, watching his son not just succeed, but redefine what success meant. Elias didn't mirror his father's model. He reshaped it. And in doing so, he reminded Robert of the very ideals that had once driven him to build this empire. Of course, not everyone adjusted overnight. Some resisted, some left. But for the first time, Sterling and Company was shedding the weight of appearances and reaching for something honest. The company began attracting new talent, people who had once passed on opportunities because they didn't believe they'd be welcomed. Now, they were being recruited not in spite of their differences, but because of them. One quiet evening, Elias walked alone through the building. The floor was nearly empty, the lights dimmed. He passed the conference table where Amanda had once thrown coffee across the glass, and where now team huddles shared laughter and ideas. He paused by the janitor's closet where his uniform had once hung, then smiled to himself before turning off the hallway light. He didn't need to prove himself anymore. The world may have tried to place him in a box: race, status, appearance. But Elias had torn it open from the inside. Not with fury, not with revenge, but with a mirror held up for everyone to see. And in doing so, he hadn't just reclaimed his birthright, he had earned it. Elias Sterling's journey was never just about taking back what was rightfully his. It was about confronting a culture of quiet prejudice with unwavering dignity. What began as a man in a hoodie stepping into a building that bore his family name ended as a powerful redefinition of leadership, justice, and identity. He was humiliated, disregarded, and stripped of the respect he deserved. But Elias never retaliated with anger. He listened. He observed. And when the time came, he didn't seek revenge. He sought transformation. From the polished glass halls of Sterling and Company to the mop bucket in the janitor's closet, Elias showed the world what real strength looks like. It doesn't need to shout. It doesn't need to prove. It simply stands in its truth. Through each moment of discrimination, each whispered insult, and every look that said, "You don't belong here," Elias held firm to something greater than pride: purpose. When the truth came out, it was more than a dramatic reveal. It was a mirror to an entire workplace and a society that still too often judges worth by appearances. And Elias didn't just change the lives of those who mistreated him. He uplifted those who had been overlooked, silenced, or underestimated. He turned his pain into policy, his silence into action, and his power into possibility for others. The lesson we can all take from Elias Sterling's story is simple but profound. Real leadership is not about titles. It's about how you treat the people who have none. True strength is not proven in how you respond to praise, but in how you endure injustice without losing your integrity. In a world where bias still finds quiet corners to hide in, we must be the ones to shine the light. Whether you're the CEO or the janitor, your worth isn't determined by what you wear or where you stand, but by who you choose to be. Let this story remind us: never underestimate someone based on their role, their race, or their silence. Because one day, they might be the one holding the keys to your future. If this story moved you, if it made you reflect or feel empowered, hit that subscribe button. Your support gives us the motivation to keep creating powerful, meaningful content. And remember, sometimes the quietest voices carry the loudest truths. Stay inspired, stay strong, and we'll see you in the next story.